Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Catholics Live in Discipleship. I'm your host, Darren Nelson. Today's conversation I'm very excited about. We're going to be talking about parents who are affiliated with the church but not quite engaged, and how do we help them really discover and understand their own journey of discipleship, as well as how do they help their children with their own journey of discipleship as well. We have here our guest, Heidi Indahl from Design for Discipleship. I was introduced to her. I was excited to be introduced to you, Heidi, in this conversation, because I think it's such an important conversation to have and for pastors and leaders at parishes. So welcome to the podcast, Heidi.
Thanks for having me, Darren. I'm super excited to be here. I could talk about this stuff all day, so always a good excuse to jump on a show with someone, jump on a call, and just dive into this.
Yeah. When we met, just kind of to talk about this at first, I could definitely hear the passion from you for this. What led you to create Designed for Discipleship?
I mean, the obvious answer is the Holy Spirit, and sometimes it's the best answer that I have. My husband and I actually work together in this business, and we both come from education backgrounds. He works in higher ed. He has a PhD. I work in curriculum design and program development with a master's degree in instructional design. And I had been working in doing a lot of parent and family things. Um, and right around COVID, we just started getting calls from people like, we had to stop doing what we were doing before, and we're not sure we want to go back to it. Do you have any ideas? And that's really
Yeah.
where this started, was people
Okay.
asking, have any ideas about what we could do differently? Could we be creative? Could we do this? And kind of just people asking us to bring in the education. And we very quickly realized what a powerful tool quality education is when it's paired with authentic faith and centered around the idea of discipleship rather than content. I like to tell workshop participants we're trying to move away from a church school model.
Hmm.
We are not having school at church for an hour a week and then we go home and we don't remember anything we say. This has to matter, it has to count. And what does it take to get there? So that's kind of how we got into discipleship ministry. Neither of us had any thought that that would be where we would be working at this point in our lives, but it's what has happened, and we're pretty pleased to be doing it.
Yeah. And such an important work for parishes, you know. I mean, we hear so often at so many parishes when we go in and we start working with pastors and leaders, what are some of your hopes for the parish? At the top of the list, top five, always to engage the parents,
Yeah.
to somehow better engage the families, to somehow help awaken in them the significance and importance of the faith so that they participate more in the life of the church, the sacramental life, the mass, you know. But I think what we're discovering, not that I think, we are discovering this, that it's not going to happen out of sheer hope or desire, not going to happen out of continued catechesis, but it's really going to happen by helping them understand their relationship with Jesus Christ and helping them really understand what does a life of discipleship look like for me and for my children, for my family, right? That has to be at the heart of it. But right now it's not, is it, Heidi?
No, no, it's not. And it's unfortunate because we do know that when parents take their life of discipleship seriously, when they're living lives engaging with the sacraments, lives of prayer, lives of service, when we see parents doing that, generational faith transmission is real and it works. it's that doesn't mean it's easy, that doesn't mean it's a guarantee, but it's real and it works. And so we have this temptation to say like, well, if the parents would just do their jobs, if they would just do their part, and in that, we kind of have this big gap of, but we're forgetting that we're trying to ask parents something to do something they don't know how to do because their own journey of discipleship has not brought them to that active service. When we talk about prayer, sacraments, and service, part of the vocation of a married couple in the raising of their children is the formation of their children. Well, that's a discipleship activity that happens after, so
Hmm.
they've signed up for the deal, but they haven't had the life skills, training, experience, relationship with Jesus to actually fulfill what they've been asking to do. So a lot of parishes will just kind of take this, we're just going to have the parents do it, and we're going to ask the parents to do this, this, and this, and then the parents kind of either don't do it at all, and so then it falls off completely, or they try and they get very quickly discouraged because they don't really understand what they're teaching. We were at a parish on Wednesday night, and we were speaking with a group of catechists, and one of the confirmation leaders, she said the parents and the children, when they come to the sessions together and it's time to say, just discuss with your teen what it's like to go to confession, or and the parents don't even they can't even have the discussion question because they haven't had the experience, and we can't shame and blame them
Right.
into the ability to have that conversation.
Right.
We have to nurture them on their own journey of discipleship so that they can participate in the lives of discipleship of their children. And
Yeah.
then in the meantime, we have to have a way to catechize children without interrupting their journey of discipleship, which is getting a little ahead of myself. But
Yeah.
on the parent side, we shame and blame is not the answer. Putting a bunch of responsibilities and programs and expectations on them that they don't have a relationship to teach from or an experience to teach from is not helping anybody. It's not helping the parents in their life of discipleship, and it's not helping the kids in theirs.
Yeah. You reminded me of, um, you and I were introduced by Susan Windley Dowse from Four Ways Forward book and the Mark 519 project. And I was reading in her book about, I can't articulate it perfectly because something about the silent spiral or and what she was speaking to is that there are people who are very faith filled, who have great witness about their faith. So my point is, there are some parents who are strong in their journey of discipleship. We're talking about those who are affiliated, but really don't have that strong connection to their discipleship journey or strong connect. Those are the ones who we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
But my point is this, that those who do can be great witnesses. But what the book was talking about, and it's true, because I encounter this at parishes that I do work with, is those who do have a hard time witnessing and sharing their faith because they're of the minority,
Yeah.
not the majority. And
Yeah.
that's a cultural shift that we really have to work on, is helping those who can be witnesses to be witnesses and say, this is the norm.
Yeah.
Not being a disciple is not the norm. That's not the norm. This
Right.
is the norm. And I think from what I have read and the way in which you're trying to help make that shift in what it is you're doing.
Right. That's the entire shift we're trying to help people make is um just that the people that are affiliated with our parishes, they're bringing their a lot of they're described like this: they Christmas and Easter, they only come to mass on Christmas and Easter, they only come to faith formation in sacramental prep years, they drop their kids off at faith formation and leave even when we have parent events, they sit in the car rather than come into the building, and it's always in this negative framework of what the parents are doing, and they're not engaged and they're not doing the stuff. And how do we take that parent and look at that parent as a unique individual with all the dignity that God has given them and all of the church's desires for their salvation alongside the salvation of their children and say, this parent is in our program and it might be the tiniest desire. We don't know why they're here. We don't know what is driving them. I always like to remind people it is way past socially acceptable not to be involved in a church at all. So culturally, in the greater world outside the church, it's completely acceptable in most circles not to have a faith engagement
Hmm.
at all. So these people that are often spoken of in this negative light, these parents, something in them is bringing him here anyway. And so if we can reach to that and meet them there at that desire, meet them in whatever that desire is. We don't know what it is. Um, but if we can connect with that and start there for the parents, well, also helping them with what they've asked us to do. They're bringing their kids to faith formation. So they have asked us to give their child an education in this regard, to do those things at the same time and slowly bring them along together
Yeah.
rather than just look at everything they're not doing. I had someone throw something at a meeting once. Well, why are we doing anything if they're not doing their part? And I get it. It's super frustrating. But being frustrating with the parents is not going to help us move into something that can influence change and have a new conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's reminding me, I've had numerous conversations, one with Nick Hardesty, others, about these thresholds that people are in, and for a lot of these who are parents who are affiliated but not necessarily engaged, they're in that pre-trust threshold where they some kind of trust. That's why they're bringing their child, but not engaged. Um, and we have to meet them there. We can't expect them to meet us where we think they need to be. We need to meet them there. So those are the challenges, Heidi, right? These are the challenges that we face. And I love some of the material that you have. I love this term that you've created. It's called diminishing discipleship, right?
Yeah.
Explain a little bit about that, because you are focused on, hey, addressing the challenge. Here's the challenge, people. We want to help you understand it and help you move away from it, to more discipleship. What's diminishing discipleship?
So you just mentioned thresholds of adult discipleship. We kind of talk that trust, that curiosity, openness, seeking, depending on whose model you're using,
Yeah,
this kind of moment of early discipleship, conversion, encountering Jesus. And all of those things happen very naturally through family life in a generational faith transmission, in the way the church has taught us for a long, long time now.
yeah, forever.
In my family, we bring our children to the church, they're baptized, we go to mass, they they learn the trust from the very beginning that the church is a safe place. The church is a place that um they can feel comfortable and knowledgeable and they're welcome there. They encounter the gospel at church. They hear the stories of Jesus. They may be way before their own ability to understand the gospel, but they've already met Jesus as a person. They've already heard his stories in those first years of life. And then we come to like a period of faith formation. We do the first sacraments, and we continue to grow in the stories of Jesus and the lives of the saints. And they start to have this like gradual understanding that this is my relationship with Jesus too. Like Jesus is for me. He did this for me. It becomes personal. And this is like a process that they go through. It's very similar, actually, if you break it down, to the process of those adult threshold models. It just happens more stretched out over time with maybe less clear markers between the stages. I think with adults, we often have a clear conversion moment. We don't
Hmm.
have that, I think, as often in generational faith transmission. But it's this awakening to Jesus in the life of the child and the slow taking of ownership of responsibility of that. The sacraments invite them to deeper participation, more graces that allow them to ask questions about what God wants them to do with their lives and look at matters of vocation. And this all happens very naturally with very little, um, I don't want to say little outside influence because there's a ton of outside influence there, both in the family and in the church, but it's not terribly complicated.
Hmm.
You know, it isn't terribly fancy. The curiosity of the child drives the stories. The enthusiasm of the parents points back to prayer and the faithfulness of the parents. The parents and children serve the community together. So that's kind of the ideal, right? That's what can happen, and I think it's important to acknowledge still does in a great many cases.
Yeah.
Uh, but it is the minority.
Hmm.
What we kind of have happening now instead is we have this diminishing model where parents will come to they'll have their children baptized, but they will not engage in the parish until those first sacraments again. They don't have the number is actually 300. If for 6 years you go to mass every Sunday, you've been to mass 300 times. And I think we can all agree that you learn a lot in those 300 times, even if you're only 2, 3, 4 years old. You're picking up all this information and you're getting that sense of safety. So, in this diminishing model, kind of what happens is trust fails to establish. The church isn't a safe place in the child's life. They haven't heard the gospel. They haven't seen the life of discipleship lived out in their parents. So they come back to the church for their first sacraments in second grade, probably, and they aren't able to access it at its full intended depth because we're starting over at trust. I've spoken with First Communion catechists who say, I'm trying to teach, the vessels of Mass. They're trying to teach something very basic. It's covered in every single First Communion curriculum on the planet. And when you're teaching that to kids who have been to Mass 300 times, they already know what they're used for. They just maybe don't know the technical names. And so
Right.
you show a chalice and everything about the chalice is there. The only thing you're adding is the vocabulary. For kids who have not been to Mass, they don't know what a chalice is and what it's used for. They might guess it's a cup, which is a starting point, but it's a starting point that's a lot further back. I've
Yeah.
even heard stories of students who didn't know who a priest was, like
Mm.
saying that the priest uses this during Mass. That's too advanced because the student doesn't have a mental image of priest. And so, even at these first sacraments, their understanding is so diminished that they're not even able to really access the sacramental graces in the same way. And that just keeps building over time, right? When the trust isn't established and then the sacramental graces are not able to be lived. They don't come to the catechesis in the meantime. Anything they do learn at church school is removed from the rest of their lives. When it comes time for confirmation, everything just kind of points them back to the world and the influence of the church. That's how we get to this, whether it's eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade. It's kind of the American kind of eighth and 10th are kind of two main American ages that we use that we have confirmation. By the time we get there, now they can check faith off their list and move on. And so instead of a growing that's building and kind of coming to this, what am I going to do with the rest of my life vocational mindset, we get this, oh, now we've gone down the hill and we've checked off all the boxes and I don't have to
Yeah.
worry about church anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And how you know what, here's what you make me think about in all that you said too. That is, I mean, you just stated the ideal challenges that we're having, right? That is when we talk about the affiliated but not engaged or disengaged parents, and what happens within the structure of the family, their kids throughout those formation years, that's it, right? One of the things that really struck me when you were talking about, when the kids come back to religious ed after the years of the families not going, but now we got to put them in because we want them to receive first reconciliation, first communion, and they're being taught. Not only, you use the image of the cup, but just the word, the gospel,
Yeah.
the readings, the stories of who God is and what he desires for us in our lives, the homilies in which we hear. Now, at a young age, I get it. They may not, but kids pick up things that we just are amazed by, right? I mean, you see toddlers using vocabulary that their parents use because
Right.
their parents are saying it over and over again. So, you know, to so I think the question is not the question, but the challenge that everybody's trying to overcome is um, so how do we engage these parents in a way that will help shift the challenge that we have? Because it's happening even between, first, like you said, first communion, first reconciliation, first communion, confirmation. Those kids who are going through that formation, they're there, but they're still disengaged because their parents are disengaged. There's no true support for them, So what do we do? It's like
Yeah.
how do we shift that? I mean, I think that's what a lot of people are trying to discover, right?
And that's really what we've done with the Design for Discipleship system is attempt to answer that question in two directions at the same time. The first one is as educators and knowing what we know about the human brain, knowing what we know about human formation, the more disrupted that cycle is in the life of the child, the least the harder it's going to be to overcome later, right? So we're not okay with just being okay with that for the kids until we work on the parents. And that's an area that I kind of sometimes get in debates with people who work with adult discipleship because the way they see it is that once adult discipleship is reestablished, then that will naturally take care of the the diminishing discipleship of children and reestablish the proper norms. Unfortunately, what's happening is that's kind of become a perpetuating cycle because we only have those 18 years and really we only have 12 to 13 years. I mean, we know that by age 12 most kids have decided whether church is for real or just a waste of their
Yeah.
time that they're trying to a train they're trying to get off of. We know that. And so we have this window with the kids and adult discipleship takes time. So if we're focusing on the adults, our current faith formation models are kind of serving, when I'm being very blunt, I call it a factory for nuns, for NONEs, for
Mm-hmm.
non-affiliated. Because now they've become, then they graduate from confirmation and
Mm-hmm.
then I put that in quotations, you know, for those listening on audio. Um, but we we let that happen. And now we have to start over with those adults because they haven't had the formation that we could have provided. So the first pillar and where we really kind of, I don't want to call it a pillar, but the first kind of dimension that we work in is how do we work with the brain to catechize those children? And we can never get it as rich as it would be with the parent support at home. But are there things we can do to make sure we're backing up far enough to make sure we're establishing trust with kids, that we're giving them key experiences, and that we're doing it in a way that works with how the brain learns at different ages? Because the brain learns in very different ages. And so a lot of what we've done is put together resources to help, from the ages of birth to 6, help parishes re-engage and educate on just how much kids are learning by coming to mass, even though it's hard. And that's really, quite frankly, a lot of the reason the parents will give. We don't come to mass between with our little kids because it's hard. And I get that. I feel
Hmm.
that very deeply. I've been there.
Hmm.
So just to help parents educate and encourage, even if the just that baseline level of mass attendance, and help them understand what kids are learning, but not only by but on then by identifying what kids are learning in that age, we're also identifying what they're missing when they come at 6 to 12 and they haven't had those first 6 years of mass. What do we need to instruct that we're taking for granted they have? Like, we're assuming they know who a priest is. We're assuming they know what the gospel is, or the Bible, or the stories. We're assuming they have that. Let's challenge those assumptions and go back and fill in those holes, because those are all very foundational pieces without which it is disconnected. It is church school. It's not related to our life outside of the church. So on the child side, that's kind of what we do on a curricular and a formation level, and a lot of the resources that we have are focused on helping parishes engage on the formation side in that regard. The other dimension of that is, how do we do that while respecting the parent on their journey, meeting them in their desires? How do we build trust with them? How do we ask questions and listen in a way that nurtures trust and understanding, that encourages them to ask questions and feel invited to participate, even though they don't have a degree in theology? I
Hmm.
think sometimes we have to be careful that we don't emphasize knowledge of the faith with the ability to live the faith. And I think that's a key premise of discipleship. Disciples will learn the information they need in order to live the call God has asked them to live. You can also learn a whole bunch about the faith and pay no attention to what God is asking you to do. Those are two extremes, but and most people are somewhere in the middle on that, I think. But there's not this magic amount of theological knowledge that's required before you can have a relationship with Jesus. And our American mindset is very knowledge intellectual, it's very outcome oriented. What can I prove? And so I think parents, they feel discouraged. They don't think they know enough, so why try? There's
Hmm.
enough other things that I can do. So how do we meet them where they are? So that's kind of the other dimension of the resources that we work on, is how do we invite parents to participate in faith formation in ways that are accessible? Uh,
Hmm.
a lot of parishes have found success with varying family models that are not curricularly based, they're relationally based. So we have mass, and we have a meal, and then we have an activity together, but that isn't so much focused on catechesis, or at least not the big catechesis that we think about. We have, again, that intellectual mindset. We want to teach people more, and we're excited about it, and we want to bring them up to this level, but we have to start where they are, which is
Yeah.
maybe more foundational. Let them come to church with their kids and encounter Jesus and have fun and experience community, not in like a rah rah VBS every single day of the year kind of way, but in a way that plants seeds that are going to take time to nurture. It's one parish that I have kind of been working with a little bit. They had been doing a monthly Sunday evening where they would do that, the mass, the meal, and then they'd have an adult education and a child education component kind of separately. And after feedback from parents, and this is exactly what we encourage, listen to your parents, ask them, what do they need? Ask them.
Yeah.
What do they want? Ask them. We send out surveys, but then only if the engaged families actually fill out the surveys. So we get the wrong impression about what families want, because we're asking the engaged families, but trying to reach the not engaged families. So
Yeah.
ask them. So this parish, they'd been doing this evening mass for a year, this monthly evening mass, and they did some talking to parents. They actually did a lot of casual surveying of just parents in the parking lot after faith formation, like just going out and talking to them. Good
Yeah.
old fashioned, like pound the pavement surveying. And they found that families really liked it, but they would really prefer that it was once a month after the latest mass in the morning instead of once a month in the evening. So now
Hmm.
they haven't shifted yet, but they're working on what does that shift look like, and can we do it? And even the priest was like, to be honest, I like it a lot better,
Yeah.
because by the end of a weekend, he's already said three or four masses and he's tired on Sunday night. and he wants to have the enthusiasm to welcome and encourage and invite these families. He much prefers the idea of, so it's kind of a win-win for everybody that only they only came to because they took the time to ask not the engaged parents, but the unengaged parents
Yeah. Yeah.
what they
Yeah.
prefer.
Yeah. I truly believe in engagement, right? We have to, accompaniment is as much as of a buzzword that has become, accompaniment is so important. However you want to phrase it, walk with somebody, be in front of somebody, engage somebody. Um, I think it has to be very genuine.
Yeah.
It has to be genuine. Here's where I get nervous when we do these gatherings where we're inviting either general parishioners or parents. Here's where I get a little nervous, though I believe in doing them, is we'll offer something like that. We'll invite parents to come to, let's just say, I don't know, an evening of getting together to socialize and welcome them because we want to develop that trust. We need those. Absolutely. In today's culture, we need them because that's what's going to draw them in. But we also need at those events people who are going around talking to those parents with a very genuine heart.
Yeah.
And I'm going to kind of articulate the difference. Someone who goes up to a parent and says, "Hey, how are you?" "Oh, good." You know, and starts getting into the sports or the activities that the families are a part of. That's all good. But to also engage and say, "How are you doing?"
Yeah.
Like, how's last week been? Would have been some, was it
Yeah.
kind of challenging? It sounds like you're pretty busy.
Yeah.
That's where now you're really starting to develop that genuine trust. Wait a minute, Darren really cares about me. He wants
Yeah.
to hear about me, not just hear how busy I am, but like that's a lot.
Yeah.
To say to somebody, that's a lot. And to really, if we don't do that at these gatherings, I think we're missing something. The parents walk away and just say, "Well, that was a great event." Just like what we did with the basketball team.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I completely agree. I
yeah,
100% agree. I think a lot of this is as we build parishes that are focused around discipleship, this is always going to be a multifaceted because what you're describing is now we need to provide um, encouragement, equipment, resources for those who are there because the ones that should be doing that are the engaged families. They're the ones that need to understand their apostolic call to invite the next family in.
yeah,
And yeah, it does. It starts listening that invites trust. You have to listen more than you speak. You can't be there to either defend the church or pitch the church. You're just we're just there to be in relationship with you.
yeah,
People see through that when we're just there to kind of say, "Oh, well, you should come to church more because you should come to church more."
yeah,
They see through that so fast.
yeah, yeah. And a lot of people are at a place where they may not really believe or understand why. There's no impact for me there. There's no great return for me there. That's where a lot of parents are. I mean, there's no way other to say it. They're just like, well, it's not impactful for me.
Right. And I think that's where we have to think about those thresholds of discipleship. We always talk
Mhm.
about evangelization as filling the pews. We want more people in the pews. But in order for that to happen, the desired outcome of those individual events, those individual conversations that take place at those events, trust is actually the desired outcome, not attendance. Attendance
Yeah,
will come as trust, openness, seeking, invitation, we need more systematic understanding of what discipleship is, even among those who are living it, don't necessarily know how to talk about it and invite other people into it. So this
Yeah.
isn't something that we can just buy a new curriculum, it's a magic bullet, it fixes everything. There's not one magic answer. The solutions are always going to be locally focused. They're always going to be on the ground. They're always responsive, not imposed.
Yeah. So, Heidi, when you're working with catechists trying to address this challenge, what are some of the ways in which your organization is encouraging catechists to be different, think differently, you know, really kind of be different, like from your perspective, what are you saying to these catechists, to these ministry leaders, parish leaders? Here's what we need to start doing.
To be honest, I say something a little bit different to catechists than I do to parish and ministry leaders. The answer's a little bit different for those two audiences because to catechists, a lot of it is helping them reframe their mindset around why what they're doing matters. That it's helping them reframe their mindset around discipleship rather than the passing along of a specific set of knowledge or completing a specific curriculum. Depending on the age, when we're talking about sacramental prep, we might with catechists get into a little bit how to work with parents who themselves are not practicing the faith. We might get into the little bit of the nitty-gritty of like what do you send home, what do you invite in. We talk a lot with catechists about prayer being a connection to families, inviting children to bring their families' prayer intentions into the classroom and ensuring that in their own lives of prayer they are praying for their students and families and for whatever opportunities may arise there that could be a connection point to build trust with families. For the catechists, I'm really talking about being kind of shifting that mindset towards discipleship, respecting the discipleship journey of the parent, seeing them as partners, not barriers, even when their input is nothing more than carpooling at this point. So for the catechists, I'm really focusing on helping them shift that mindset. Most of them are volunteers, most of them are not particularly highly trained in either education or discipleship or theology. They're all very different things, and they're not,
Yep.
most of our catechists aren't trained in any of them.
Right. Yep.
So for the catechist, that's really where we're at. We're trying to take it at that level, the level that the catechists are, the importance of their own discipleship and modeling and relationship and just general discipleship education that helps them on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
It's really with the ministry leadership that we start to talk more about this family level. How do we engage this family level? Um, And I say to them kind of what we've been talking about. This
Mm-hmm.
has to start with trust. It has to
Mm-hmm.
start with you have to ask these people what they need. You have to go where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that is on a physical level and a kind of psychological, spiritual level. You have to go to where they are. And if they don't trust the church, you have to start there.
Yeah.
Because some of them are coming but don't actually trust us at all.
Yeah. Yesterday I was talking with as a podcast episode with Tom Corcoran from Rebuild, and we were talking about how do we help parishes strengthen volunteers at the parish, right? So we had many different um, thoughts and conversations around that, but something that I think is very critical and crucial that we have to remember is as we are doing this work, we are, first of all, doing the work of God, not our work. So, catechists, ministry leaders, whatever, we are doing the work of God. And in that, we are experiencing God, right? Like we should be looking for the ways in which God is working in front of us. We get so caught up with um, are they getting this the way they need to get it, right? That's the pedagogy or catechetical mindset. Are they getting it? But really try to pay attention to how is God working in their lives. Even at that pre-trust conversation, how how's your week been? That sounds challenging. You must be tired. I am. That moment when someone allows themselves to be vulnerable, I believe it's the Holy Spirit opening up their hearts to say, thank you. It's God's presence working there. So I just think it's important, right, for us to, because we get tired, us just to recognize we are doing God's work and God's work is happening in front of us. How do we recognize that more?
And to be honest, what you just described, we see it all the time in catechists. I think that, um, especially when we talk about the 300 masses, when I fleshed out the 300 masses problem, is what we call it, the 300 masses problem. I was always worried about how blunt I could be when I was talking to catechists about, oh, I don't want to be critical or I don't want to be mean. But when I stated the reality, that what you're doing is hard because you were never meant to do it this way, they walk away with so much hope. They walk away so encouraged. And they tell me this all the time. Thank you for saying that. I thought it was just me. I thought I was doing something wrong.
Mm,
And I thought that I wasn't good at this job. And I thought that I couldn't do this for one more year. Or I couldn't do this one more time. Because people that have been doing this for 20 or 25 years see the rapid acceleration of how much bigger this problem has gotten over the last 2 to 3 generations.
yeah.
So to be honest and meet them where they are and say the reality of what they're experiencing in the classroom, this is hard. And it
Yeah.
is not the way that it was meant to be. But what I always tell my kids is that it's good to recognize problems, but we can't be a problem maker that just sits in the problem and complains about what everyone else is doing.
Hmm.
Let's see the problem and then let's talk about what it means to move somewhere from here. We have to be honest about it. We want to accurately identify it. We want to accurately assess it. Those models that my husband and I have been developing of discipleship, of the diminishing discipleship, of returning to that maturing discipleship again, those models are built out of trying to understand the situation so that we can respond to it in a proactive way that leads to something, that leads to Jesus. It's not just something, it's we want to lead this. This should be leading to Jesus. And if it's not, I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah. 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 You know, um, Gosh, this has been such a hope-filled conversation. It really has. And we're at such a critical moment in the church, aren't we? I mean, this awareness has been happening, but I really feel like I'm feeling it with pastors that I work with. This awareness is really here at the fore. It's right here. That we really need to make a significant shift in how we are engaging families and parents at our parishes. We have to make a significant shift. That's why I feel this conversation has been so hope filled. Um, we will certainly have your links in our podcast description, but just leaving us, Heidi, what would you recommend could be some next steps for those who are listening or viewing this podcast? What would be some words of encouragement for next steps?
So I think that the most important thing is what we've been talking about, making this shift from presenting content to authentic discipleship. We have to get real about what a life of discipleship looks like and identifying it, teaching about it, and desiring it. I think that's really, we have to desire this for the people that we work with, the people that we love in our parishes, in our communities. If once we've made that mental shift that this is about discipleship, that Jesus is the goal and the program all put together. He is the purpose and everything comes back to that. The next thing I kind of suggest that people do is take a look at getting really honest about the starting line in your parish. Okay? What is the starting line? If you're going to tackle this by yourself, you have to know your starting line and you have to be real about it. You have to be brutally honest because you can build the best bridge, but if it doesn't go all the way back to where your people started,
Mm,
it doesn't matter because they can't get on it. So those are the two things, like what do we want and where are people starting, that I think are so key to this. In that regard, we do have a kind of a listening that builds trust interview guide, questions to help people engage with those affiliated but not engaged families, to hear their experiences, learn about their lives. And I am happy to send that resource to any of your listeners that want to send me an email. My email is Heidi, Heidi, at Designed for Discipleship, spelled correctly, designedfordiscipleship.org. And if they want to email me, I'm happy to just send them, just let me know that you heard about it on the podcast and you want to have that resource so that you can use it in your parish. So that's like the anybody can do that part. Anybody can do that step. If you are interested in going really deep into what it means to have a system of evangelical catechesis in your parish that is oriented towards discipleship, then again, same email, reach out to me, because we do come into parishes, we sit down with leadership teams, we help form them in how they're going to work together and who's going to do what and what are the goals and what is the clear vision. We help these leadership teams define a clear vision for their programming. And then we walk them through exactly what I just told everybody to do. What's the starting line? What's the goal? What's the measures? And how are we going to build that bridge to get from
Mm,
there? So they do, that's like the big picture option. If you're really like totally overwhelmed and you just want someone else to look at how you could do this with them, we're happy to help. Otherwise, yeah, just try it. You can learn a lot. I am a big fan of playing with this stuff. I don't
mm.
think we have the perfect tool. I think we are all together as a church building new tools that can lead to a future centered around discipleship.
Yeah. Amen. Gosh, thank you so much, Heidi. This has been a great conversation. I certainly will twist your arm again in the future to get you back on here, talk about any new things that you might be happening. But thank you so much for being with us today.
It was great to be here. I'm really glad that you reached out to me.
Great. Well, everyone, please be sure to check out the show notes for all the links, and email Heidi. We'll have that email in the show notes as well, so you can get that resource. Thank you, everyone, and God bless. Until next time.